Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Turnkey tries to bring you information that can help you and your organization be more successful, and that goes double during today's COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we are addressing what we are choosing to see as an opportunity in these challenging fundraising times. Why right now is the right time for volunteer engagement. Before I introduce our speakers, just want to cover a few housekeeping items. First, we are recording this webinar, and we will share the recording and the PowerPoint deck with you tomorrow, and also post it on our COVID-19 resource page. So you don't have to worry about taking notes or screenshotting or struggling to capture the information. We're going to help you by sharing that with you tomorrow. Also, we want this to be interactive, so we will be answering all of your questions. Please see the Q&A icon either at the top or the bottom of your screen, which is the best way to ask us questions. We'll either answer them during the presentation or at the end. So now for our speakers. First, we have Otis Fulton, who is Vice President of Psychological Strategy at Turnkey. He speaks regularly on the psychology of fundraising at national conferences. He writes a weekly blog on psychology and fundraising for Nonprofit Pro and is the co-author of the 2017 book, Dollar Dash, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. Otis has degrees in social psychology from Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Virginia. Next, we have Vicki Labello, who is the lead strategist at Turnkey. She has been working in the nonprofit sector in senior leadership roles for most of her career. Her passion is helping nonprofits build to the future state they want to achieve. She has expertise in all areas of nonprofit fundraising, operations, and organizational development. She has had the opportunity to implement many changes within the organizations where she has worked either as a leader or as a consultant. And last but not least, we have Jamie Butler, who is a consultant with Turnkey. Jamie is a certified meeting professional with over 20 years experience working in nonprofit management, fundraising, and training. Her unique blend of experience in both nonprofit and corporate event and meeting management make her a great partner in creating and producing training and leadership experiences focused on fundraising and organizational strategy. She enjoys creating incredible attendee experiences that move volunteers and staff to action through training, coaching, and empowerment. Building and enhancing program structure and creating volunteer leadership infrastructures are just a few of Jamie's superpowers. Before I turn it over to Vicki, we wanted to start, like I said, we want this to be interactive. So we want to start with a poll for all of you. So I'm going to bring that up now. We're going to ask you, how much focus are you currently putting on ramping up your volunteer engagement? Go ahead and lock in your votes. We'll give you another 10 seconds or so.
Kelly, a question from the group, is 10 the best?
Yes. 10 is that's your main focus. 1 is you're not thinking about it at all. Okay, I'm going to share the results of the poll and then turn it over to you, Vicki.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay.
Wow, 8. Great.
8. Good. That's great. Well, we're going to help you with that. So, and it looks like there's 4 of you that are at a 10. Great. All right. Thank you, Kelly. Otis, you want to? Okay. So jumping us off, these 3 pictures are some you may have seen. They're New York, California. I'm in California, by the way, and Florida. And I personally am surprised They're all from 3 or 4 days ago or a day ago. I'm very surprised, given instruction, clear instruction from our national and local leaders, why people are ignoring that instruction. So I reached out to Otis and I said, Otis, can you help us to understand why people are putting potentially their lives and their families' lives at risk by continuing to not adhere to social distancing?
Yeah, why can't we seem to do what's in our best interest? And as I was putting these ideas together, I got more concerned about what's in our future. And I use the word concerned because you shouldn't probably use the word freaked out in a webinar, but that's kind of what I felt like. There are a lot of reasons, actually. People suffer from something called optimism bias, the tendency to believe that you're less likely to have something bad happen to you than others. Another reason is, here in the United States particularly, we have a sense of personal agency, the sense that we are in control of our own lives and that, we control the outcomes. And it causes people to, like teenagers, act out. And interestingly, I spent a lot of time in Japan over the years. This is much less so in Asia. And I think it's so interesting that the Asian cultures are handling the coronavirus much better than the European and I think how Americans are going to handle it. Another reason is we have this long-held wisdom that in a crisis, we've got to carry on. And for the last 100 years, we believed that in the midst of a disaster, our job is to go on with our lives the best way we can. And now the government's telling us that the best strategy is really to upend our lives completely. And we just don't have any frame of reference for this. Nothing in our lifetimes has ever happened like this to any of us before. And, in general, people are poor at dealing with the future. We as a species, we tend to be focused on the short term. And think back to how our ancestors lived in the African savannah, where our brains evolved to survive. The people that thought short term tend to survive better. And so we tend to discount the value of things happen in the future. And we're very, what psychologists call, cost averse. When there's a reward, we respond very strongly. But when there's a cost, we just don't want to engage with it. And so we become reluctant to deal with any kind of uncertainty. And I just have to say that I think a lot about climate change. And I think that CV19 is kind of a mini version of climate change. Instead of 30 years, it's only 3 months. And we're not even handling with the 3 months very well. And finally, I think that physical distancing is a better term than social distancing. We just have to stay socially connected through this crisis. And I think that that's where the opportunity to engage with volunteers is really, really imperative. Right now, community building, togetherness, and building emotional connections through social media is really imperative for our mental health. And as I was, again, researching this a little bit, I came across a recent paper in the British journal, The Lancet, the medical journal. And researchers reviewed 24 past publications on the psychological effects of what happens to people in quarantine. And people suffer post-traumatic stress disorders, confusion and anger through quarantine. And, will we come together after this is over? The answer is an unequivocal yes. But I think that we have such a great opportunity now to provide something that's very psychologically satisfying and a huge psychological need for people through volunteerism.
Thanks, Otis. So what can you do? People are locked in, your events are canceled, postponed, modified, gone virtual, so many changes happening. What can we possibly do during these uncertain times? And we ourselves are facing this. We're faced with anxiety and all the things that Otis pointed out for us. So let's start by talking about the barriers. Everyone's in the same boat. This is both a barrier and a benefit. Think back to a time when you had to face something very challenging, even something as simple as building your first event ever, or something that you went through with a group of people. I can tell you that some of my experiences mean that those folks and I have been bonded forever. This is something that we are bonded together, that we're all in the same boat together. both in the US and in the world. We're connected in this situation. As much as we all hope we weren't connected or part of this situation, we are connected. It's impossible to tell how people are being impacted unless we ask, which can be stressful. It's tough to pick up the phone or send a note and say, "How are you?" Because you don't know. We don't want to offend. We're hearing this from a lot of our clients. I know this to be true. You don't want somebody to think that you're calling and asking for a donation when really you're extending the hand of friendship. Important to keep that in your mind as you reach out. And yes, you may face a time when you call somebody and they might be sick. They might have a cold and be worried that they have COVID-19, or they just may not be very healthy.
So let's talk a little bit about the opportunities, because there is opportunity in this moment in time, and thinking really about, what do your people need? The things we want you to really remember is that your volunteers love your organization. Their passion and ability to engage is not limited to your current fundraiser or project. And I think that's really important to remember in this time. Your volunteers, your supporters, your donors, they are connected to your mission. And the fundraiser or the project is a product of your mission. People need to feel empowered, especially now, and the scope of our empowerment is a lot more limited in this moment in time. So this is something that we really want to think of as your opportunity in this moment as well. There's no events to prepare logistics for right now. There's no countdowns that are consuming your time, that have you focused and moving from one thing to the next quickly without a lot of time to really connect and absorb. The constant event cycle that we all live in, where we never have the opportunity to take a breath or pause, this is the unforeseen opportunity to breathe. And I know it may not feel like that, but there's a disruption in our everyday churn right now, and you have an opportunity to leverage it. There is more time than you may ever have, ever, in this moment to deepen relationships. So we want to encourage you to think about it as an unrealized gift. To work in volunteer leadership environments means that we weather them in good and bad together. So let your volunteers be part of determining the opportunities and creating the solutions. It's not just about thanking them. Let them feel called to action.
Steve Jobs. We hear from nonprofit clients and others that even in the best of times, it seems difficult for staff to pick up the phone and call people. There's a story about Steve Jobs early in his career I found in researching this. I hadn't heard it before. He was 12 years old and he needed some sort of microprocessor thing as he was building out his first computer, and called Bill Hewlett of Hewlett Packard, co-founder, and said, "I need this thing. Can I get it?" And this is a 12-year-old calling, so imagine the gumption and the things that he needed to set himself up for. Well, great story. Bill said, "Yes, not only can you have the part, but I'd like you to come to work for me. You're the kind of gentleman that I'd like to have working for our organization." He said he's never found anyone who said no or hung up on him when he called and asked for help. So our behaviors in this moment in time may need to be a little bit different, or these may be behaviors you have leaned into in the past. As you reach out to volunteers or potential volunteers, we need to look at how our approach is changing. The past was much more understood. We typically moved fairly quickly to what we in the industry called the ask, and much earlier in the conversations. People knew that we were going to ask them to do something. We moved there fairly quickly and were able to fast track that. our behaviors will need to shift to a new approach in order to engage volunteers and understand their current situation. Of course, empathy, understanding, inquiry I want to touch on with regard to making sure that we are probing a bit deeper. If you're getting a pat answer, I'm fine, tell me more, what's going on? And of course, appreciation, that they're part of your community, and we appreciate them, standing with your organization.
So whether your outreach and calls to volunteers impact your fundraising or not, it will have an impact. The goal is to help the volunteers that you work with to know that you care and help them feel a little less anxious and a bit more empowered. And you have the power to do this. I belong to a service organization that has just launched a Call to Connect campaign, asking our active members to take on a short list of our sustaining members who are often more mature, to reach out to them and let them know that we are here. And just have conversation about maybe the mundane thing that's happening as they shelter in place. In regular life, we may be more direct in our communications and approaches about our needs or our requests. And in this time, we are focused on listening and exchanging. That's really where we want to be. And focus on that empathy of one another when you make those connections.
More mature, I like that. I remember my mother used to say that as I put on weight as I got older. She said, "Oh, you look more mature now." So I guess that's a good thing.
Hey,
Vicki,
Otis, sorry, I saw a comment in the box. I want to make sure we forgot to credit Maya Angelo for the quote. So thank you, whoever pointed that out for us.
Vicki asked me to put together just kind of a little script for a call. And there's nothing magical about this. This is kind of what I came up with. Hello, this is Francis Wyckoff. I'm a volunteer with XYZ Foundation. Hey, I'm just calling today on behalf of the organization to thank you for being a member over the last few years. And we're just calling to check in with our folks. Just wanted to know how you're doing. How are you holding up through all this? And then Jamie said, listen, do some listening. And then maybe share a little bit about what's going on with you, but only if they ask. It's really about them. And then just finish up with saying, I know that the mission of the organization is important to you, and we want to assure you that even as the country's experiencing all these difficulties, our work will go on, and thanks a lot for talking to me today. Just something very simple and genuine like that.
I'll also add, Otis, in these types of calls, there's typically a balance that is weighted toward the person you're calling. Feel free to share how you're doing, especially if they ask. But remember that your primary objective, our primary objective, is all about them. Really them knowing that we do care and we're in this with them.
So we want to talk now a little bit about shifting. And we want you to think about what your organization is willing to do different in terms of volunteer roles than you normally might do. What will people need to serve in those potentially newly formed roles? And, on the slide here, we've thrown out a couple of ideas, and, we encourage you internally and hopefully with volunteer partners to get creative about what is needed in your organization in this moment in time. These potential new roles will likely look different and feel different. They will also help your constituency to see how your organization is adapting and continuing to serve. And they may end up morphing into roles that serve the organization beyond this moment and impact your work positively in the long term. We want you to think about exploring with your volunteers and discovering and discussing the ways that they can mobilize. They may have the idea that will impact your organization in new ways. I do also want to talk here about if you don't currently have a robust volunteer infrastructure or volunteer program, or maybe before all of this happened, you'd been toying with building volunteer capacity and what that might look like in your organization. And I'm here to tell you that this can be your moment. I believe that volunteer leadership infrastructure is the backbone of a resilient fundraising program. That is deep in my core belief system of working in the nonprofit space for so many years. Outreach to participants and donors and tee them up that your rescheduled events will need increased people power when they do operate later this year. That, tell them that the organization is investing in building its volunteer capacity and looking to recruit committee members and program volunteers to help shape the next phase of your event or your program. And be transparent about wanting their input and volunteers who want to take action for the long-term stability of your mission. The volunteers you recruit in this time to take on a greater role will become connected to your organization in a different way than maybe has been typical. And their connection story will be that they answered the call during the pandemic, and that's how they came to be on XYZ committee. And all of this will add to your volunteer infrastructure and help you to move forward. So while you're thinking about creating new roles and brainstorming with volunteers and staff, remember that your objective, or what will naturally come from this, is creation of new communities. And if you've seen the recent Facebook commercial, a community can be a group of people that loves to do anything, to play the kazoo or rock in a rocking chair. The frame around your community will look different than in the past. And it's for this moment, and that's okay. These might be communities that evolve simply to carry you through this moment, and they may be communities that emerge as something you didn't know you were missing that will serve you long term.
Let them lead. In order to do this work, we need to focus on our key constituents. Depending on your current implementation methods, we recommend volunteer leadership committees and team captains. These individuals have already displayed their passion and commitment for your organization. Our goal is to adapt our approach to help them continue to work with us. We recommend starting here because the numbers for your team should be manageable. Of course, prioritizing based on past performance, fundraising, or current relationships is optimal. And of course, understanding if you're able to get to them all, if you have the resources to do it, that's a wonderful thing to do, even if it's a virtual phone bank night. We used to do those physically, where a lot of people would go into a single office and make calls. It could be fun to do a certain timeline where you have volunteers and staff doing outreach to others. I'll reiterate what I believe Jamie said, and that is, as you're letting them lead, help them come up with the solution. I find for myself and for clients that we're feeling that we have to have all the answers. I can assure you we don't. The folks that are passionate and leaders for your organization will have some wonderful ideas.
Vicki, should we take a moment for inputs or questions? Should we take a pause?
Any questions, folks?
Can also just be an input. You might not have a question.
Great so far. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll forge ahead. So let's talk a little bit about then and now. Then is like 3 weeks ago, and now is today. So many of the activities that we've done in the past, I'm sure you guys are already exploring, can potentially be managed virtually or refocused to be virtual engagements. And so we're not telling you anything you don't know, but working with your volunteer leaders on prioritizing these types of interactions and then finding ways to make it accessible and engaging is key. And once again, not feeling like you need to come to them saying, I've got the solution, here's how we're going to handle all these virtual things, but working in lockstep with them to help them be part of creating what that next step looks like, what that virtual solution looks like. So let's take one example here of rallies, meetups, and kickoffs. You know, much of what we do in the peer-to-peer space is so incredibly social in face-to-face ways. So really start to think about how a rally or a kickoff can be formatted in a unique way, not just, okay, we all log on to the Zoom together and here we all are and here's our agenda, but maybe it's a family dance party rally with a group of new people, or an existing team that puts on some kind of really cool virtual activity for the rest of the team captains. It may be focused on one group of people doing something and everyone else tuning in to be part of it. And I think that that's a really good solution. I also want to talk about team captain interaction. So this is the moment to really deepen those relationships too, and to hear from them about what they need as a team captain in your event and in your organization. And yes, you can still convene team captains in a virtual space. In fact, it could be a really good idea to share how the organization is faring and what the plan is for the event moving forward. And just keeping people updated, even if you don't know the plan, it's okay to say that. Because remember, we're all in that boat together.
And people really want to have opportunities to interact, right, Jamie?
They really do. And I also think as leaders in your organization, this is a time to also think about what can come out of all of this, taking in input about your fundraising platforms that may help you in looking at your events through a different lens. This could be the time for that, to start really hearing what people are telling you and maybe making some changes.
I'll also add on the dine and donate. It was interesting because I know we've built this a while ago, but yesterday, as part of Great American Takeout Day, I think I have the title right, one of the local nonprofits jumped on that and had a percentage of stuff that was mentioned. And it was fascinating to me, first of all, how much the community poured out their support to the restaurants in town and going to those restaurants. But the percentage of sales piece was all over social media. This wasn't a large nonprofit, and people were both, getting the dual positive of helping to support the restaurant industry during this time, as well as helping to support a nonprofit. The virtual or the social interaction was incredible. I haven't seen anything like it in a long time. So let's talk about a paradigm shift. How do we measure success in the midst of all the things that are changing? And I'd love to hear in the Q&A if anybody has some new measurements they've already established. I'd like to share that with the group, but I think revenue will still be one of our measurements. Much of what we do is helping to raise funds to help our mission and our organization move forward. During 9/11 and after that crash, one of the things we measured on was retention and relationships, making sure that our staff and volunteers were focused on things that could have an impact in the current cycle, but would definitely have an impact in the long term. Your staff will need to know what success looks like beyond the metrics of revenue and participants. Success in this moment will be measured in outreach, connection, and conversations, I believe. Any new ideas out there? Somebody willing to share? Quiet crowd.
Come on, guys, this is where we socially connect with one another.
We need a little more agency. Here's a chance. Here's a chance. There we go. We got some.
Okay, let's keep going.
So it might feel a little out of place, like this moment in time doesn't warrant surprise and delight. But I am sure that all of you, like me, we are seeing in multiple mediums right now how humans are supporting each other and finding ways to lift each other up. And we have a client who said, if our constituents say, I was really impressed with XYZ organization, they were there for me, that their year will be a success. And that's one of the things that we really want you to take with you from today, is to really think about what are the impacts that you'll make during this experience that will surprise and delight the people, the volunteers that you work with on a daily basis, and maybe the ones that you are less frequently connected to, but will connect in this moment. That can serve as the exact surprise and delight that you want your organization to deliver to your volunteers and donors.
Yeah, and just to comment, I don't think you need to overthink this either, Jamie. People have probably said to their supporters, you're part of the XYZ Foundation family. Well, treat them like they're a member of the family. What would you say to your sister or your brother or whatever? If it's appropriate to say to your family member, it's probably going to be very appropriate to say to them as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and surprise and delight in this moment will be picking up that phone, but it can also be sending them a card in the mail. I mean, how exciting is mail going to be for us right now, right?
Yeah. We have a couple of comments. I heard one client say they put together a COVID-19 task force. They're pushing volunteers, and the task force gives them ownership. Great idea. And another one said, one nonprofit that I donate to sent out their event hand sanitizer as a surprise and delight. We were very happy with it. That's brilliant. Very brilliant. Very smart.
Good on you. Yeah, that's awesome. And now when this is all over, everyone's going to get branded hand sanitizer for future scenarios.
It's going to be the number one product.
Just so we've been saying it this entire experience and during this entire session, but in this moment as humans, we're all looking for things that we can impact and that we can control. And we just really want to drive home that letting your volunteers help you find the solutions now is more critical than ever. We get caught up in thinking that we need to solve it ourselves and tell them we figured it out. And we actually don't, and we actually shouldn't do that. Let conversations take you where they'll go, and you'll find that they will be asking you, what can I do? But first, you have to make the interactions happen. Nonprofits are at the heart of social resilience. And that's really important for all of us who work in those spaces to remember right now. And don't decide for your volunteers if they should support you now. In fact, don't ever do that. Allow them to be part of delivering the joy in this moment, whatever that looks like. And what you'll be creating without necessarily realizing it is a bond with them and among them that will emerge as a stronger fabric for your organization on the other side of all of this. So we want to take another poll. Do you believe that volunteer engagement needs to be a priority, which is a little different now from what we polled in the beginning? So let us know what you think.
Sorry, I can't vote on this one. I know how to vote.
Yeah, we don't get to vote on any of them.
The panelists don't get to vote on these.
Not bitter. We have results, Kelly?
Kelly, you're muted if you, oh, there we go.
100%. Wow, that's great.
Woohoo! I feel personally deemed, everybody.
Everybody gets a car.
Yeah.
You get a car and you get a car. Wonderful. Thank you. Otis, I think you have another slide. Okay, let's start with any additional questions. And then I think Otis has a link on the last slide to where the resources are.
Questions, inputs, thoughts, musings. We'll take them all.
And I'll add, as you're seeing the slide, that Turnkey is doing a series of different webinars. Our topics are typically based on feedback from our clients. So thank you all for queuing up different ideas of what we should work together with our clients and others to identify some different approaches to the work that we do. We have a question, I think. Yeah. How might you engage volunteers you haven't seen in a long time or that haven't come back?
That is a great question. Let me take a shot at it first. Activate all of your lists, lapsed donors, all of them. Tell them what you're doing now. If your mission is any way tangential to the crisis, if you're a healthcare organization or whatever, your constituents or a compromised group, you want to definitely talk about that. I wouldn't stretch it too much because you'll strain your credibility. But now is the time to reach out to everybody that you've ever touched. Thank them for being a part of this. Tell them that you couldn't have gotten to where you are without without them being part of it, which is true. And re-engage if you've got people that are lapsed. Absolutely, it's all this.
Agree, and I would just add to that you know, this is the time to be transparent, and it's okay to say, I know it's been a while since we've connected, but you've been on my mind, and I'm reaching out because this is not anything any of us know what we're doing in this moment, and so just be honest about the fact that it's been a minute. And I guarantee that will probably be the connector that will start that conversation. And you'll be able to talk about what's been going on since we last talked and how have you been? And those will be how you make that conversation sort of move.
Yeah, you know, as I'm getting communications from nonprofits that I support, I really appreciate the ones that address the current situation. The ones that just really make me want to pull my hair out are the ones that say, only 24 hours and your membership will lapse. I literally got one of those yesterday.
Oh, no.
And it's just, it's almost beyond belief. So I'm reading any communication that has to do with the current situation.
That's great. I'm going to jump. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I would just add to that if you have preset communications in your organization and that has not been thought of, now's the time to really explore that to make sure things aren't going out that are not relevant in this moment.
Yeah, I got another one today. It's a double your donation match. Again, just not appropriate now. Just so inappropriate.
Hopefully that nonprofit isn't on the phone right now. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to jump ahead one and then we'll go back one. What if calling isn't possible at this moment? And I'm not sure why it wouldn't be possible, but let's just say it isn't. What other methods would we recommend? Otis? Oh,
you know, I think that you use all the channels that you have available. On our Friday webinar, we're going to be talking about building virtual communities. And one thing that's going to change is, you know, your average donor, the age of your average donor is going to get younger because there are channels that your older donors, which are many, many of them, we just can't reach those folks during, you know, your typical donor, if they're a 55 or 60-year-old guy like me, probably aren't on Snapchat. You know, I'm not on Snapchat. You can get to them through Facebook, however. So I would use any channels that you know are open and are being accessed by your donors. It's not just about calling, although calling is awesome, but use all the channels that you possibly can.
Jamie, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think certainly all the social media options are there, but you know, an email can be great. And I'm still going to go back and say that card in the mail. Like, you are sheltered in place. What better time to spend an hour writing out some note cards? And you know, our postal people are out there in force right now supporting the country, and so the mail system is working. And I think that there would be significant delight in receiving something in the mail right now that isn't all the typical stuff we toss in the trash.
That's a nice segue into the next question, was recognition. And I think note cards can also be recognition myself, but other ideas on how we recognize people for engaging with us, not necessarily just answering the phone, but let's say they volunteer to be one of the new, you know, pandemic support group chair or something.
You know, let me take a quick shot at that. One of the great things about Facebook is that you're able to go into someone's wall and post a thank you right there. And not only they see it, all their friends see it. And so that's very mutually reinforcing, very rewarding for someone's, all their Facebook friends to know that they're involved with your organization, because people are motivated by something. People have something called image motivation. They want to be seen by their friends and family doing good work. And so Facebook is like a superpower to do that. It's just an easy thing to do, and it just accomplishes so much.
I have two things to add.
Yep,
Two things to add to that. One is that same ability exists on LinkedIn to do those shout outs and thank yous, and that's a completely different space than the Facebook environment. So I think it's telling people that, you know, this person in their line of work, whatever that is, it's letting their peers in their line of work see what they're doing to support organizations in this time. And I think just get creative. Like, this is an opportunity when someone steps up and says, I want to ABC whatever with you. This is the time to highlight them. So have them create a little video about why they're stepping up. And that is recognition in itself, because then you're going to put that out to your community within your organization. And that's going to spur on other people saying, I want to do this too. How can I jump in? That's
great. One of our attendees also mentioned LinkedIn as a recommendation for recognition. I couldn't agree more. Are there suggestions in how to tier our asks? Maybe one tier is help us call, but what if volunteers aren't comfortable on the phone, and trying to brainstorm a few more ideas? Otis, start with you.
Yeah, well, I think we've talked a little bit about that, you know, asking them to write a note. And by writing a note, again, don't overthink it. I was just over in Scotland a couple of weeks ago, took a course from Tom Ahern, who's one of the great copywriters. And one of the things he says is, these are love notes. These are little love notes that you'd send when you were in 8th grade. People delight in that. Make them entertaining, make them silly. He says, when he has a great story. He said, when a client comes back and tells me that this is too superficial or flippant, I know I've hit it. So, you know, 3 sentences on a postcard is just perfectly appropriate. So if someone is not comfortable making phone calls, and some people won't be, some people will really grab onto that, but ask them if they'd like to this week write 60 notes and email them the addresses, the physical addresses and so forth, and let them go at it.
Yep. Agreed.
I'd say beyond that, looking at other methods of engaging them. I mean, maybe they host a group on Facebook. I hate to always lead back to Facebook, but it seems to be the place, that and TikTok, which I know nothing about and I'm not going to say much about, where we're all living these days, because it's entertaining and it's engaging.
Yeah, well, we're also having, how many people have had a virtual cocktail hour? now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Cheers.
Yep.
You know, yeah,
That's,
my wife Katrina is a jujitsu person, and she messaged all the women that were in her gym about having a virtual happy hour on Friday. She thought she'd have 6 or 8. She had 32 people on the call.
nice.
People really want
Nice.
those opportunities. Yeah.
That's great.
They really do. And I would also say that this is the time when you're talking about your top level volunteers that are really there with you in this moment. Have a Zoom lunch with them. Like, set up a Zoom lunch. Maybe normally you would connect face to face. Set up a Zoom lunch. Set up a Zoom coffee discussion. You know, let things be a little different than they might have been before. And then just before we leave this one about what if volunteers aren't comfortable on the phone, I would also add, this is the time to put together a little 15-minute virtual training. And that's the trainer in me, saying we can give people some components and some elements that will help them feel a little more comfortable about making those calls or interactions happen.
I know what you're laughing about, Vicki.
Yes, a quarantini. I like that. Like a martini, a quarantini. And then somebody said my organization is having a pour at 4 every Friday. And now it's on our calendars until further notice. Nice way to bring people together. And could you consider volunteers or others as part of that engagement? Great way to help people to feel connected with one another. We have another question. How far out do you think we'll need to truly measure success from these efforts in terms of the buckets we mentioned, revenue, retention, and relationship? Great question. In the almost 30 years I've been working in the industry, measuring relationships and outputs has been a long-term thing. What I would recommend you do is, especially on the relationship front, keep track of who you're reaching out to. And in time, you know, I'd say monthly, take a look at engagement levels with those folks. And that'll look different based on what you decide. Revenue is going to be, a lot of it is going to be reliant on when you have activities to engage or they self-select. And of course, retention will become more apparent as you move into your next season. I hope that helps, but it will be varied either way. I do recommend and happy to work with this person if she wants me to, but really identifying some key metrics on how you're going to measure relationship. You could go very simple with, they return my calls, they answer my emails. That's a very basic relationship metric when you have two-way communication. Hope that helps.
In the long,
go ahead.
In the long term, your relationship measurement will look like, once again, on the other side of this, because I believe in focusing on there will be a new day. But the relationship side of it will look like, wow, we doubled our committee size, or we added 3 new members. So think about it in those terms. It's hard to get out of that mode of seeing immediate results, because that's how we're wired in this space in fundraising. But you have to start looking at it, taking smaller bites out of the elephant, so to speak.
And I'll just add to that, the question lead-in was how far out. I think in the next 3 months, you could have a measurement of relationships or connections made. In the next 6 months, you could look at things at retention to committee, retention to event. So I think you could measure something fairly soon. Otis, I hear you talked on Monday, I'm sorry I missed that one, about the power of surveys. Should this look different for volunteers?
I did talk about surveys, and the surveys that I was talking about were for a different purpose. Usually we think about surveys as a way to collect information. The type of surveys that I was talking about was really questions that would prime the reader to think about the organization. Like things like even check all that you think are true. Even during the CV-19 crisis, I think it's important for the XYZ organization to continue its mission. Just things like that would prime them to, psychologists have the word prime, remind or activate their feelings, their positive feelings for the organization, and that would affirm their membership in the community. Another one might be, now that I have time in my hands, I have more opportunity to do nonprofit work. Check here if it applies to me. And it gets people thinking about those sorts of things. And it also gets, sending out a survey, as Jamie said, it also gives people a sense that you want to engage with them, and you want to know, you're asking for their thoughts and so forth, which is very rewarding for people. It's a give and take. It's part of a good relationship.
So
I agree. This could be a great time for a survey that is about, not about their satisfaction with something, but about their inputs to the organization, which I think is a different way of looking at it.
Sure. And listen, if anybody would like to follow up with that with me, I'm Otis at turnkeyp2p.com. Just drop me an email and I'd be happy to share some ideas with you. There was a blog on Nonprofit Pro I wrote last week that you might want to go look at. It's called, I can't remember what it's called now because I've written so much this week, but there is a sample survey in there.
And Otis, don't know if this works in survey, but one of the questions I would be keen on asking is sort of getting that invitation to a call. Would you be willing to talk to one of our folks about, where you are at this moment and help us brainstorm about the not so distant future?
Absolutely.
I love that.
Somebody says if we could get the survey resources, that would be great. I am brainstorming for volunteers now. A duvet? Maybe that's a.
Okay.
I must be misreading that. So.
A survey. Oh,
okay.
Thank you. A survey.
It is a do. She did say duvet.
Yeah, I thought I read it right. I'm like, wait, let me get my glasses.
I thought, is that an interesting idea? Okay, yeah.
Wonderful. Otis, we can put our heads together and do something that's a little more specific to volunteerism if that would work for you.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I think if there are no additional questions, our website has the resources and the webinars that we've done to date, and there are more coming in the upcoming weeks.
Yes, that actually that survey content is available on our website. That's the best place to get that. It was in a webinar that we did on Monday of last week. We put that up, so that would have been what, the 18th? Yeah. It was what to say to your donors right now.
Wonderful. All right, thank you, everybody. Jamie,
Kelly, maybe when we send out the call script, we can include the link to the survey.
Sure.
That Otis is referencing, just so that they can get there easily.
All right, everybody have a great day.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Be well, everybody.